Honourable members, we cannot proceed in this way. We cannot proceed in this way.
Mr. Speaker,
You have the floor, sir.
the People's National Congress stayed away from this parliament for 7 months.
Yeah.
7 long months.
In 97.
And those
And 2001.
honorable members who are associated with that party are living in the shadows of that history. Mr. Speaker,
His own.
the People's Progressive Party Civic
We're waiting for you, Amna.
single-handedly beat a 7-party alliance called the APNU-AFC Alliance, the PPP alone. It took a coalition of 7 parties to confront the PPP Civic, and for us to end up in this parliament with 32 seats. With 32 seats. Had it not been for what you know, had it not been for what they know, Mr. Speaker, and what we know, this House would have been differently configured. Mr. Speaker, what I heard during the debate from the opposition or the government benches was a lot of rhetoric, declarations, slavishness, buffoonery, plagiarism. At one time I thought I was listening to the Discovery Channel. And I suspect, Mr. Speaker, that there are some
What? Only you were educated.
who chose the drive-through and pick up my speech service
Elitist. Bloody elitist.
in order to arrive at this honorable House. Mr. Speaker,
The man speaks 3 languages. How much you know, Felix? You know
congratulations. Congratulations are in order
Oh, Queen's College boy and such.
to our workers, our farmers, and all those in the productive sector who have contributed to the growth and the development of our country. We salute our rice farmers and their families whose industrious work has resulted in 18.6% increase in rice production. We encourage our rice farmers to stand firm in the demand for payments from the government under the Petro-Caribbean Agreement. And our farmers must be prepared to protest any economic injustice, Mr. Speaker, and political discrimination that government might want to exert on them. We salute, Mr. Speaker, on the occasion of this budget, our sugar workers, who, notwithstanding difficult circumstances, have toiled hard in the cane fields. We call upon our sugar workers to remain vigilant and to resist any attempt by the government to sell out, privatize, or close down the sugar industry. Mr. Speaker, all those who contributed to the increase in production and productivity as reflected in this budget ought to be congratulated, and we on this side of the House so do. Mr. Speaker, it is interesting to see that those who now defend the budget, especially those on the opposite side of the House, Mr. Speaker. Some have learned, some have not. When we were on that side of the House defending a budget, there was laughter and jollification. Now they're the ones that are defending the budget. And now the shoe is on a different foot. Mr. Speaker, it is interesting to see the effort they are making to defend the budget. And I'm happy they now know what it means to defend the budget. I'm happy that they now know what it means to defend the budget.
You're hiding now. You can't take
Mr.
this
Speaker.
rigor. You haven't got the stamina.
This good life,
You haven't got the stamina to
I'm
take
trying to exactly understand what this good life that they're speaking, what is it about?
Placid.
When they speak about this good life, Mr. Speaker, it strikes me as a misnomer. It strikes me as a misnomer. Mr. Speaker, when they say they're taking a fresh approach to this good life, it strikes me that the good life was there before. The good life was there before. And all they're doing is taking a different approach to the good life which was there before. Mr. Speaker, this good life they speak about is seen completely differently by the 49.3% of the people who voted for us. For them, the good life is what they enjoyed under the PPP. They want a return to that good life, Mr. Speaker. The good life that is spoken about on this side of the House, Mr. Speaker, is not a saleable product. It's not a saleable product, and it doesn't even have after-sale service. It doesn't even have after-sale service. Mr. Speaker, this good life concept seeks to frame us in a certain paradigm to make us believe that there's this mirage about a good life. Mr. Speaker, for many, a good life is a simple life. For many, a good life is a simple life and not a complicated life, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, everywhere we go in this country, people are complaining. What do the people say? People are saying that money ain't turning, that things were never so bad, that business flat. And they're also saying that if this is what they voted for, they don't want it. Mr. Speaker, sensing the anxiety on the ground and the backlash that is germinating, the coalition scampers off to Starbucks Square. And there's the lead of the pack who is sitting in this house. Goes to Starbucks Square to try to pacify the people, to quell their mounting uneasiness, and to make people feel that this good life is on the horizon. Who are these people who are complaining? Street vendors, small contractors, taxi drivers, small hotel owners, minibus drivers, speedboat operators, stall holders, music cart vendors, newspaper vendors, caterers, water coconut vendors, the small man on the street. These are the people who are complaining, Mr. Harman, honorable member. These are the people. And Mr. Speaker, contrary to what we're hearing, that people are smiling, people are laughing, and people feel a sense of deliverance, quite the contrary and the opposite is happening, Mr. Speaker. Someone spoke about the budget ending adult suffering. Mr. Speaker, I say the contrary is happening. This budget is the beginning of teenage and adult suffering. with 2,000 Amerindians and others. People are not enthused. People are not enthused. And I want to advise, free advice, Mr. Speaker, without any commission. Free advice. Walk the streets. Walk the streets and listen to the common man and woman. Mr. Speaker, I'm not impressed with the hype from the Minister of Tourism, the Honourable Member,
We're talking about public life.
when she promoted or sought to promote tourism. I'm hearing that Guyana is open for business. But you have to write the exam before you enter. I hear that we will clamp down on work permits. But at the same time, we will grow tourism. I feel so sad as a Guyanese. When I see, Mr. Speaker, when I see 4 Indian nationals sitting on the tarmac of our airport, it reminds me of the Guyanese sitting on the benches in Barbados. Is that what you want? Is that what you want, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, we talk about upholding human rights. We talk about upholding human rights. But we reject the universality of these human rights. We reject the universality of these human rights, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, they found it useful. The honourable members found it useful to begin publicizing who they're deporting from Guyana. Deportees are now being publicized. How many people are deporting? Since when did this country come to that, Mr. Speaker? Never in the history. Never in the history of this country did we ever publicize deportees from this country, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we saw recently where the European Union has removed visa restrictions on a number of CARICOM countries to Schengen countries. And we are tightening up. We are tightening up. And the European Union, Mr. Speaker, the EU, has removed visa restrictions for a number of CARICOM countries to Schengen countries. We're going in the opposite direction. We are going in the opposite direction. Mr. Speaker, we need, and the PPPC was seeking to put in place a more liberal visa policy. We need a more liberal visa policy, Mr. Speaker. And that is what we were working to do. We were working to put in place, Mr. Speaker, we were working to put in place the tourist card facility. Tourist cards, Honourable Member Mr. Greenidge. So that all you need is a tourist card to enter Ghana, not an exam, as Mr. Felix, the Honourable Member, is promoting. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, you know, there's a saying, the king is dead, long live the king. The king is dead, long live the king. Enter Honourable Member Ramjatan. He has to inherit. You, Honourable Member, must inherit what I left at the Ministry of Home Affairs. Mr. Speaker, to say that the crime situation is depressing and whatever else is an understatement. It's an understatement. It is not improving, Mr. Speaker. The previous government put in place reforms at every one of those agencies under the Ministry of Home Affairs, including Home Affairs. You never said a word about that. Reforms at the...
Honourable Member, you have 10 minutes remaining.
Thank you, sir. Reforms at the Ministry of Home Affairs. Reforms at the police force. Reforms at the Guyana Prison Service. Reforms at the Guyana Fire Service costing billions of dollars. What have you done with it? Yes, Mr. Speaker, I want to address you. The honourable member never mentioned one iota in respect of these significant reforms. And as though to add insult to injury, when we brought here bills calling for the change name of the police force from force to service, change name from the prison service to correctional service, change name of the fire service to rescue service, they rejected it all, Mr. Speaker. They rejected it all. That is the kind of change that we want to see, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am looking for the dictionary of who is who in the Ministry of Public Security. I don't know who is who. One time I heard the Honourable Member Harman speaking about Ramjatan's matters, Honourable Member. Another time I hear Edward Collins speaking about Mr. Ramjatan's matters. Another time I hear Felix, Honourable Member, speaking about Mr. Ramjatan's matters. I don't know what's happening. All of a sudden there's so much confusion in the camp. Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Member comes here yesterday and he flashes a piece of paper saying this is what he was given by the police to show what is the situation with crime in Guyana. I have been given so many of those pieces of paper, Mr. Speaker. So many of those pieces of paper. But you know what? The public out there has a different perception. And Ramjatan, the Honourable Member, knows that perception and reality are two different things. Statistics, Mr. Speaker, is something completely different. And they are reported and unreported crimes. Let us ask Mr. Ramjatan, the Honourable Member, how many unreported crimes are reflected in that piece of paper he brought here? How accurate it is, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hear the Honourable Member speaking ad nauseum about going after row cops. It has become like his mantra. But I want to tell the Honourable Member, Mr. Speaker, that going after row cops, you have to tread delicately. You tread delicately. Because if you don't, you will end up violating the Constitution. The Honourable Member has pecuniary interest in a particular matter. And he's going as far as the Police Service Commission to issue instructions as to what should be done and what should not be done. Mr. Speaker, let us talk about the dog and pony show. Let's talk about the dog and pony show. The Honourable Member, Mr. Speaker, made mention yesterday about sniffer dogs. But let me tell the Honourable Member, when I brought the experts from Texas, Mr. Speaker, the purpose of bringing those experts from Texas was because the dogs at Tamiri and at Ogle were not catching anyone with drugs. The drugs were passing through the airport and not a single bag with drugs was being caught. And I asked the question, how come we have sniffer dogs at the airport and the drugs are not being found? And so it was necessary to bring the experts to make an assessment. Read the report. It's in the ministry. And Mr. Speaker, I took the decision that the government must have value for money. We are not going to bring additional dogs unless the police accepts the recommendations from the experts from Texas. And then, when those recommendations are accepted, we move on. But Mr. Ramjatan is now the Honourable Minister, Mr. Speaker. He can choose to do as he likes. But we will learn. Let's talk about piracy. Let's talk about piracy. The Honourable Member goes up to Barbies and he promises the fishermen guns. But the fishermen say they're not interested in guns. They're not interested in guns. Talking about helicopter and plane, Mr. Felix, in the last budget, the Honourable Member said they must have an air wing, must have an airplane. Where's the plane? Where's the airplane, Mr. Felix? Mr. Speaker, we have an anti-piracy plan at the Ministry of Home Affairs, where you now sit. Ask the PS for the plan. Mr. Speaker, there is an anti-piracy strategy.
Nonsense.
There is an anti-piracy strategy at the Ministry of Home Affairs. The Permanent Secretary, Ms. Johnson, has a copy. I'm sure, professional as she is, she'll lend you a copy. And you can see all that we've bought. Because we hear talk about reconstructing the Marine wing of the Guyana Police Force. But you better ask the right people the right questions. Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member, you have 5 minutes remaining.
How much?
5 minutes.
5 minutos. Muchas gracias, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.
I heard
You can speak
remarks
nothing
yesterday about demoralization in the police force. Let me inform the honourable member, since he's rather green to the sector. It takes a long time, Mr. Speaker, for promotions to come through. For the police commissioner has to make the recommendations, and then the police service commission has to do so. Adjustments had to be made at the level of the assistant superintendents before the cadets could move up. Or else they're blocked. The cadets cannot move up unless the police service commission promotes the assistant superintendents to senior soup, and then the cadets could move up to fill the gap. Mr. Speaker, reference was made about refusing leave to senior officers. But Mr. Speaker,
the police service commission and the
the senior officers were told that at Christmas time, at elections time, during the crime wave, and during Cricket World Cup, you need your senior officers at home. It is like cutting your nose to spoil your face if you give leave to most of your senior officers at a time when they're needed at home. The exigencies of the service. The exigencies of the service. Mr. Ramjatan, I'll remember he did. He can give them leave. But you'd have to bear the consequences. Because in the same year as Honorable Member Cathy Hughes is accusing me of what the police should be doing, he will be accused of doing things that the police should be doing, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that we heard that we must give what is called respect. We must give respect.
You have 3 minutes remaining.
We have to earn that respect. We have to earn that respect. And if these honorable members over there continue to behave just the way they behave, they're not going to get that respect from us. They're not going to get that respect from us, Mr. Speaker. Trust me. They're not going to get it. If this pattern continues, if that pattern continues, they're not going to get the respect. So, let them be warned. Mr. Speaker, there's so much to talk about, but I conclude now. Mr. Ramjatan, in an interview, said, notwithstanding the difficulties in the security sector, he will nevertheless conduct himself like a good soldier. But you know, there's a famous novel called The Good Soldier Shriek, written by a famous Czech author. The Good Soldier Shriek. The Good Soldier Shriek, Mr. Speaker, was a man or a character in this book that roamed Europe. They didn't know whether he was undermining the then emperor of the Austro-Hungarian Empire when he was serving it. They didn't know whether he was serving the Austro-Hungarian Empire or whether he was undermining it by virtue of his actions. But he eventually ended up in a madhouse. He eventually ended up in a madhouse, Mr. Speaker. And a question was put to him. A question was put to him. And listen to the question, Mr. Speaker. Do you believe in the end of the world? What did the good soldier speak? What was his response? I think the response was quite instructive. He said, I'd have to see the end of the world first. I'd have to see the end of the world first.
Member,
Before.
you have a minute to wrap up.
Mr. Speaker, I want to say that the sector that Mr. Ramjatan now has responsibility for, notwithstanding the fact that it has been chopped left, right, and center, I'm still trying to figure out how he's making out there. Because there's a lot of intrusion, all kind of things are happening. But I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that if you check the assignment of responsibilities in respect to Kanu, there's nothing there in respect to Mr. Ramjatan. In the gazetted responsibility, in the gazetted responsibility, it doesn't fall under Mr. Ramjatan, but yet in the estimates, it's there under public security.
But not in the Gazette of your responsibility.
So, Mr. Jordan, the Honorable Finance Minister, will have to clarify that for me, because I'm interested in this fight against drugs. How come you have money in the budget for public security, but he doesn't have the gazetted responsibility?
Honorable Member, your time is up.
On that note, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.